Let's start a command prompt. Let's do that in administrative mode. And now we go to our X drive where we have all our demos. We go to the folder demo 1.4.4, and here you see that we have a DB folder, a web folder, and a Docker Compose file. Let's use Explorer to have a better look there. You see that we have a DB folder, which contains a Docker file and 2 SQL files. And we have a web folder that contains the web.config file that we want to add, and of course the Docker file. Now, in the DB file, you see that we have the Docker file. Let's have a look at that. That's the way we want to build our Docker image. We're going to use Microsoft SQL Server Windows as the base image. And we're going to run some PowerShell commands on the SQL files that we have so that we fill up the SQL database with what we want. And then we will start the image with a PowerShell command to run the database server. Next, on the web, you see that we also have a Docker file. Let's also have a look at this Docker file. Here we start with a base image Microsoft ASP.NET. And there what we will do is we will add some data which we will get from an external URL, which then download a blog engine that we want to use. Then we will run a PowerShell command to build the application, and then we're going to override the web.config file so it will go to the DB file on our machine. So here you see the web.config file, and if we open that up, then you can see that there is a definition server DB. That's the name of the database that we want to go to. And we're going to use Docker Compose to ensure that we can find the database by its name. So here you see the compose file, you see the services that we defined, and we have the web that is built using the web folder, and we have the files in here. So here you see the Docker file that's then being referenced for the build. Now you see it depends on database, and DB is the name on the network later on. It builds using the DB folder, and it exposes 14.3.3 using network address translation for us. Like I said, the name is addressable by DB, so that's the reason we can use the web config file and define DB as the name of the server. So now I can issue a command called docker compose, which is docker-compose build. And now it will build according to the YAML file that we had. You see that it runs the build. It now created the images for us, and now we do a docker compose up, and this will start up multiple images at once. So we'll first start the database and then the web, because that's the dependencies that we have. Now we'll start a second command line, so I can issue the docker ps command. You see that both images are now running. So we have 2 containers up and running, one running SQL Server and one running the web. Now I will look up the IP address using docker inspect. And now what I can do is I can then browse to that location on my machine, HTTP, then the address that I just found in my docker inspect. And then I go to blog engine, because that's the location where my web application can be found that is hosting the blog engine. That will reach out to my SQL Server that's also hosted on this machine, and then we will see the blog engine running. And here you have it. So here you can see the way we can use Docker Compose to just set up multiple containers on the same machine and making them approachable through the network by the name that's defined in the Docker Compose file. So the next thing that I would like to do is then say, okay, I would like to go to my folder where I have my YAML file, so 1.4. And now, if you see here that we have the YAML file, I can now do a Docker Compose down, and that will then tear down both the database and the IaaS server that I'm running. Now the nice thing is when I do a docker ps, you see that no images are running anymore. And it also cleaned up any images that are done or exited. You see now the website is gone, it's not used anymore. And this is a very nice and convenient way of doing container composition on a local host.